Hi folks, Unreal Engine 5.3 preview is now available. Download the 5.3 preview from the launcher today and test drive orthographic and volumetric rendering, along with a host of additional experimental features for animation and cloth, virtual production, and more. Dive into the forum announcement thread at forums.unrealengine.com to join the discussion. We're pleased to announce our latest sample project. Cropout, made entirely in Blueprint, is a top-down casual RTS game sample project that demonstrates best practices for building a title designed for cross-platform release. From low-spec mobile devices to powerful gaming consoles and PCs, Cropout is set up for you to build once and distribute everywhere. Learn more at unrealengine.com/feed and download the sample today. In our latest developer interview, we caught up with Epic Mega Grant recipient Wild Arts on the development of Born of Bread, their Paper Mario-inspired RPG game built entirely from Unreal Engine blueprints. You'll be happy to know that you can pet the dog. Jump onto the feed for more. Moving over to this week's Community Spotlights. 3D visualization artist Aditya Rajani created this spectacular real-time forest environment in Unreal Engine 5. Taking full advantage of the Black Alder pack from Quixel's Tree Collection. Take in the tranquil cinematic forest over on their art station. In this 3D action-adventure visual novel platformer set in the fantastic world of Kalaskor, embark on your quest to find lost elemental powers as the young boy Matthias, joined by the mysterious entity, Kalydra. Fight epic battles, discover magic, and learn your place in this extraordinary world. Wishlist The Path of Kalydra by Final Boss and Vavsor Game Studios on Steam. Sit back, relax, and take in this calming beauty of our final spotlight of the week. Created in Unreal Engine 5, filmmaker Igor Shvlenko leveraged their skills in kitbashing with Kitbash 3D assets, as well as characters and animation using Character Creator 4 and iClone 8 to help portray the vibe they were going for in this gorgeous environment set in a futuristic world. Let them know what you think of Meditation over on the forums. Thanks for watching this week's news and Community Spotlight.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Inside Unreal, a weekly show where we learn, explore, and celebrate everything Unreal. I am your host, Tina, and today with me, I have some of the incredible developers behind the very newly released, as of just a few hours ago, Cropout Sample Project. So if you haven't had a chance to check it out yet, please go download it right now. It's available for free. Download it and maybe hang out with us while we go through it. You can actually pull it open and walk through the same stuff that we're going to today. So to kick us off, we're going to go through and get all of our guests for today introduced. So starting off with Aaron, would you like to tell us just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm Aaron. I've been on the stream a few times, so some of you might know me. I'm senior content developer here at Epic. I build stuff in the engine and show how it works. Generally just mess around building stuff. That's basically my entire job, and I love it.
I feel like that's also a very humble way of putting it. Mastermind behind a lot of really cool things for us, but you know, professional tinkerer is another way to put it, I guess.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Oswin. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
Yes, of course. I'd like to. So for Cropout, I was working on the character. Everything character specific, like character model, textures, etc. The animations and the props he's using, and that has been a lot of fun. On the top of that, freelance animator, character artist, worked on various projects since 2006, I think. Yeah. And yeah, especially this kind of project is exactly what I love. So if there's any way I could keep working on things like these, I would very much love to do that.
That's awesome. I feel like it's another very humble, just casually been working on this sort of thing for almost 2 decades, just a little bit of experience, I guess. And then last but certainly not least, we have Anya. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a environment artist, concept artist. I do illustration, just like paint pretty stuff, in stylized, colorful things. And for Cropout, I worked on the environment stuff. So I made the buildings and the trees and things like that.
Awesome. Well, very excited to have you all on here today. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk about it. I know there also may be a couple spots where if any videos get a little finicky, we have two travelers here with us today, which makes me extra thankful that you took the time to come on today. But yeah, we'll move forward from here. And Erin, I guess just to kind of get us started off, do you mind maybe explaining a little bit more about the Cropout sample and what it is for people who might be unfamiliar?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you aren't familiar with it, that's kind of what I expect, right? Because we released 5 hours ago, I think, something
Pretty
like that.
recently.
So yeah, it's really new. So if you just bring up my screen, I'll give you a little quick overview of what Cropout is. So you'll have seen our samples in the past, probably. So going into our Epic launcher, over to the samples tab, and we've got things like Lyra, which is kind of a new kind of third-person shooter, like multiplayer shooter demo. And then we also released StackoBot, which is like another little kind of third-person platformer demo and things. So we're trying to build out more samples in our kind of in our roster, right? So that we can show people how you go about building these kinds of games. So Cropout is a top-down kind of casual RTS game that demonstrates how you can build, kind of that kind of genre of game, which you don't often see in Unreal games, right? Like it is traditionally, kind of more thought of as like the first-person shooter, third-person shooter kind of genre. But the reality is, right, like that's just a camera position. So we can do kind of all sorts in there. So I'll just start a new game on this one and kind of just take you through it so you can kind of see how it works. So we've got continue new game. I'll start a new game up here. And we're just doing this inside the editor just so we can kind of like pause it and mess around with it whenever we want to. So we start off with our little town hall, and we've got our little villagers who are very lazy, and they won't do anything unless you tell them to. So we've got a few different ways of moving around. You can just kind of click and drag. You can use WSD. You can use the gamepad, or you can use touch input. So we're trying to support as many different input types as possible, so that we can support as many different platforms as possible for this project. So if we want to get our character to do something, we need to click and drag, and we'll get this nice little kind of dotted line come out, which tells you, the path that they're going to take. And we can command them to start, kind of like doing some stuff for us. So we're going to set this guy collecting some food for us from this bush. And they're going to go to that bush, gather the food, and then they're going to deposit it in our town hall, and then we're going to increase our resource. And we can do that for kind of everything. So we can do that for our trees, we can do that for our rocks. And as we start building up resources, we can start building items. So again, it's like a nice little simple, kind of RTS game. It's by no means is it kind of like commanding hundreds and hundreds of troops to, kind of go and kill another village. Like it's very much nice, calm, mainly focused on farming, hence crop out, kind of where you have to build up all your resources until you can build the monument. And I can cheat a little bit here and just give myself all the resources that I need in order to build that by just going up. There we go, up to, I think I need 500 to build the monument, and I can go and I can build that, right? And then I can tell our villagers, hey, you go and build my monument for me. And once they build the monument, you win the game. We get a nice end game screen telling you congratulations. And if you run out of food at any point between that, then it's game over, and you can start again or go back to the main menu. So we've tried to create in this sample a full game loop, so that you've got your main menu screen. You can play, you go through, you have a win and a lose condition, and then you can go back to the main menu again. In this instance, we did it. Congratulations. Though I did cheat massively in order to do it. So we have that as well. So the game is made entirely in blueprints. So you don't need to go kind of rooting through any C++ in order to see how it works. The entire sample's kind of available to download. And you can use the assets for whatever you want inside your Unreal projects as well. So if there are elements of this that you want to kind of take and pick apart, or if you just want to use it as a learning resource, it's completely up to you. Kind of from that perspective. And yeah, that's the game. So nice and simple, really. And we've got a big guided tour. It's about 40 minutes long that takes us through each of the different elements. I'm going to try and avoid as much of that content as possible, but we will be answering any questions. So if you do have questions about it, then kind of obviously let us know in the comments section, and we'll get to those.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for walking us through kind of that quick overview of it. First of all, it's adorable. I have to just get that out of the way. Was there any particular reason that you wanted to go with this sort of style when you were planning out the project?
Yeah, I mean, it's so a lot of the projects that we do at Epic are, kind of making the best use of Nanite and Lumen and showing these kind of hyper realistic, incredible looking environments. I just wanted to make sure, that we're still showing that Unreal's, perfectly capable of doing any art style. Like you can do whichever one you want, including, kind of nice and cutesy and nice and relaxing environment. And that's kind of, kind of how I ended up finding Anya. Was basically just trawling through ArtStation until I found their portfolio and just went, that's the one I want. And then just reached out and said, hey, can you come and do some art for us?
I was happy you
That's
did.
awesome.
It was such a fun project to work on, and totally delightful to do all the like little bits of concepts and the 3D. It's sort of a dream project to be able to follow stuff through from start like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, if you're okay with it, I would actually also love to talk a little bit about kind of the build up and creation of the project in the first place. So I know you just mentioned it was important to you to make sure that we could show other ways that the engine can be utilized besides just hyper realistic action RPG crazy stuff. So what was kind of the initial thought process behind getting all of this started and sort of digging in there?
So we, kind of as a team, at Epic, we were looking at just areas of the engine that's underrepresented, right? So what games have we not shown how Epic would build that kind of game? Kind of what kind of art styles are we not really representing at the moment in the content that we're putting out there into the wild? And just wanting to make sure that we're not forgetting anyone, kind of any one particular developer, and that we're trying to represent as much of this stuff as possible. So that was kind of the first goal. So before we even had a particular game in mind that we wanted to build, we knew that we wanted to pick something that wasn't, kind of something that we already had in the roster. So hopefully when you look at all of the samples that we've got out there and you see Cropout, it will look very distinct and very different. And we kind of want that because we want to have, my goal personally is for us to have as many of these samples as possible that showcase every, kind of every different variant that we might have, so that if someone is trying to start out for the first time and going, I really want to build this kind of game, they have at least a nice starting point to go, well, how do what would that look like, right? Because it's very rare that you get to just open up a game that has been made by someone and see how it's been built, right? Like you just don't get that. You can't go and open Call of Duty and be like, well, I'm just going to go into editor mode and just see how that all works, right? Like it's a closed system for all of these things. So there's a lot of mystery for a lot of people about how these games are made. So we really wanted to make sure that we're covering as much of that as possible and showing people, okay, well, if you want to make this kind of game, here is a good starting point for you to go about building that. And then once we, kind of had got that initial goal in place, we just started thinking about the different types of games that there are. And RTS jumped out really quickly as one that we don't see, not just from like that kind of genre of game, but that kind of movement system. You just don't see a lot of. There's not really a good example of that. We've had a third person kind of like point and click template for quite a while. But we've never been able to really show it in the context of, well, how do you make that work on a console with a controller, or how do you get that working on a phone with as a touch device? So, kind of, we really wanted to kind of get that nice kind of broad spectrum, and RTS just seemed like right out the gate, just like a really obvious choice for us to choose.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I would also love to kind of dig into maybe any of the more specific processes and stuff like that we can kind of open up, look under the hood, especially since, as you mentioned, this project is definitely very beginner friendly and being able to approach it from a slightly more, trying to think of how to phrase this, a newer stance, newer kind of developer getting into the engine. So yeah, if you have any examples of particular features and stuff that you've put together that you think could be interesting for us to take a deep dive in, I'd
Absolutely.
love to do that.
I think, kind of good one to start with is some of the artwork that Anya made. Because Anya was the first person to kind of join us as freelance for the project to do it. So it's nice, kind of nice starting point. And one of the big things was that even though this is a cross-platform sample, so it works on mobile and, kind of most of the other devices that Unreal supports, we still wanted to leverage the new tech, right? So we still want to use Nanite because it's still it's a good render path regardless of what assets you're generally using, right? Because it is quicker. So one of the big ones was kind of getting these assets that we wanted Anya to build. And I think, Anya, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, was this the first time you were using, like, having to do nanite nanite level geometry for this stuff, or had you done it before?
Very surreal to use. I've obviously spent years working in a full optimization kind of workflow, and this was not that.
Yeah, it was really funny because I think the first time you did one of the assets for us, we were like, we need more geometry with that stuff, because it just, obviously Nanite is just dealing with all of that LOD definition and LOD breakdown and stuff for us. So we could get away with having much higher levels of geometry than we normally would. So you can, again, like, Nanite's decimating this down a little bit, so you can't see it. And also, I'm not sure how good the resolution is going to be on this, but you can see that we got really high resolution on that. So it was really fun, really fun to kind of introduce an artist to Nanite and being like, no, you can have subdivisions now on the geometry, and that's kind of fine. But yeah,
That's awesome. I actually,
that was kind of
I have a bit of a follow-up question for Anya real quick, if that's okay. Of with working with the nanite in this project, did that present any difficulties since it was maybe a slightly different workflow, or did you find it kind of made things faster almost?
It's a bit of a double-edged sword. So I found that working in some ways, stylized art lends itself well to low poly. A lot of the reasons that stylized art exists in the first place is because you're working with poly budgets. So then working with this stylized stuff, but you have, a lot more polys to play with, it definitely was a bit of a shock, and I did have to adjust my workflow a little bit. But once I kind of settled into it, things did happen faster because you're not having to really get your geometry super clean in terms of baking normal maps, because you're not having to optimize it so much. So in that sense, once I did figure it out, it was fine. But yes, it was a little bit of an adjustment for sure.
Interesting.
Yeah, you
Thank
adjusted
you.
very, very quickly, though, I will say. It didn't take you long to get into the groove of working as Nanite. But yeah, so kind of, we've got these assets, right, and they're super nice, high poly, and then because kind of we haven't got nanite support on every platform. At that point, we just go to the fallback mesh. So we can turn on nanite fallback, which is what the renderer will use if we don't have nanite enabled. And at that point, we just use the LOD generation that's built into the engine to just generate all of our LODs for us. And then we can specify those per platform as well. So we can say, okay, for like super low end Android, we will start at LOD 2, and for high end Android or for kind of low end Xbox, we'll start with LOD 1 or whatever. So that way we can really easily kind of go, set up a pipeline. That just means that we can just press a button and it's just sorted. So the way that I set this up for this one was that we just set this, kind of this high level of nanite geometry for all the assets. And then I clicked on one of them, set it up the way I wanted to, and then you can actually just copy and paste the LOD settings for the mesh across all of them. So we can just copy LOD, and then I just selected the others and pasted it across, and it automatically just generates all of the LOD definition and detail for us, and all of the settings it's going to apply. And then if you need to tweak individual ones, you can do. But we could just kind of like throw that stuff in. So it meant that we'd have really nice nanite level, kind of detail and geometry for the first, for PC and for, kind of like the high end console platforms. And then for the lower end platforms, we can just switch to the fallback and the lower LOD levels, and it just works, right? Like kind of you just build it out for that device and you automatically get it. And because you're specifying that you don't want anything past that LOD, it actually strips out that detail as well. So you don't even pay the cost on memory. So it's not like you're holding some, kind of 50,000 triangle mesh somewhere on your mobile device that you're having to deal with, right? Like it's just been stripped out. So that was one. And then on the character side, with Oswin, one of my favorite things is actually the hats, which we had quite a lot of fun doing. So I'll just I'll bring those up as well. I think they're in here.
I think every time I checked the Discord when you guys were working, there was like hat discussions happening. It was like hats.
We spent so long discussing hats. It was good, but the end result's really nice. So if I play the game and zoom in on one of the characters, you'll see. So all of the most of the hats have these little physics animations playing on them. So they kind of bounce around and move, and you get these nice little secondary animations. So going through. Oswald, I don't know if you want to say anything about that while I'm kind of showing it off, or if you're happy for me to carry on. Up to you.
Well, about the hats, because that definitely is a big topic. I think to me it started feeling right once we decided on a certain direction for the hats, because somehow the hats gave the character the kind of life we needed. It just felt right, and I'm very happy that you actually even pushed it into this direction to go that wild with the hats, to have them like a bit over the top, because it's such a nice element of everything here.
Yeah, I think it sells them on what job they're doing straight away, right? Because like one of them's wearing a nice wood block, and others wearing a bunch of kind of apples and stuff in there as well. So it kind of helps share it. But so one of the nice things we did, and we again made Oswin do all of the work on this, but was making sure that the hats actually had a shared skeleton. So even though the bones of each of the hats diverge quite drastically, they share the same base. And this is something that's I don't think a lot of people necessarily know about. They think that if they have kind of a different skeleton setup, or that has extra bones, that they have to have a whole new skeleton. But actually, we can just share a single skeleton. And as long as it's got the same path, any leaf bones that come off that, so any additional bones that come off that, just get accounted for as extra. So in this setup, we've got one base hat skeleton. Again, I think Oswin can say again how if this was much of a pain to get set up or not. We have one base skeleton, and then we actually have all of the other hats come off of that. They have kind of like a secondary, kind of hierarchy that comes off there, but they're all sharing the same base skeleton. So you can see that we've got, kind of the root here, and then there's actually builder, farmer, gatherer, miner, woodcutter in this single hierarchy, but only some of these are active for that index. So it means that like the big benefit of that is that you've only got one skeleton, which means you only need to have one animation blueprint for that setup. So for the hat, all we have to do is set a rigid body on on our hat, and as long as we set up the rigid body for that particular skeletal mesh, it will just work when you drop a different hat mesh onto the villager. Yeah,
Yeah,
you did have
from
to
a
do a fair bit
creation
of setup.
yeah, from a creation standpoint, that's actually very nice to have a shared skeleton, because it's easier to work on them, to prepare them for in-game usage when there's like a shared skeleton, because otherwise you always go through the same problems again and again to make it work for all the hats in this case. And the way we set it up, once it worked for one hat, we were sure it would also work for the others.
Yeah, absolutely. It worked really well in the end. So again, we can kind of just simulate, and you can kind of see it all just drops and goes down. So yeah,
cute.
and then the other really nice thing about this as well is that as an optimization point, kind of the rigid body on every single hat might be a little bit expensive. So we can disable rigid body completely just using a console command. So inside the device profiles, which I can never, it's always either window or tools. I'm fairly sure it's tools. And then we go to device profiles. Just gotta get it right. There we go. On our Android setup, which will be brain not working here. We've got kind of some extra setup here so that we can kind of turn on and off rigid body. So for the Android devices, again, we just disable rigid body completely. So you don't get the nice bouncing animations on the hat, but you also save kind of quite a bit in that hat not having to figure out all of those kind of physics movements and springs and things like that on there. So it works quite nicely for that.
Amazing. I mean, those are, I mean, like you said, Oswin, they add so much extra life to the characters, and especially from the single camera point RTS view. I feel like it really helps having something to, and correct me if I'm wrong, but almost approaching a character from the top down, since that's where you're seeing them mostly from, is from that sort of upward angle. Did that affect the design of these characters at all?
Extremely, actually. We had to start like with the character itself, but it really came together when we had the hats, because then we knew it would work the way we intended to work. And I really fiddled a lot on the hats to make them feel right from a distance, because that was the key idea, to make it read from a distance and not like only up close.
Yeah, I've got
definitely.
a bit of footage here actually from one of I think the very first kind of placeholder character that you did for us, that was more to kind of get like the animation and the pacing down right. But we kind of got this little temporary character in to do that, and then we went through quite a bit of iteration, I think. So I've got some of the concept here that Osmond did as well, where we were kind of just trying to iron out, like what should this character look like. And I think kind of one of the big things was that when we were looking at kind of like proportionally like head size, you tend to work, if you want to stylize the character right, you would give them a nice big head and a small body, and then you kind of like have like a 3-head or 2-head height character. But actually for the top down camera that we were doing, didn't really work as well, because it just meant that the head obscured the entire body and you didn't see any of the animations. Right?
Yeah, that's why we went like 2D and 3D back and forth, and also, yeah, just tried things to see what feels right, because we had set up part of the setup that was set was the landscape and buildings, but we didn't know exactly where we wanted the characters to go. So we were going back and forth into different directions to just see what fits. And in the end, I think what worked best was the simplest approach. So the simpler, the better. And yeah, that's where we ended up. So like, it's just some round shapes, and here and there some edgier shapes, but it's a super simple character, and that's exactly what it needed.
Mm.
Yeah,
Gets
I've
the
got another
point
one here where
across.
it kind of looks a bit like a Doctor Who villain at one point.
Yeah, yeah. There's always like a direction you take where you just like, what the heck? That's not
Well,
what
I
it
think
has to be, but but it's always important to get that out of the way
Hello.
to decide like, okay, that's the direction, not that.
yeah. But I think actually the animation that character's doing, I think is pretty spot on to what we ended up with. I think we sped it up a little bit, didn't we? But um,
Yeah,
pretty
we
pretty
did,
similar.
but yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. That's always
this one was really
one
good as
thing in
well.
animation. Yeah, to see the proportional change. Yeah, and
Mm.
it really changes a lot, although it's not like really a lot that's changing, but uh, I think it helped us
Can you
to
talk about how
get to the
you
final.
can you talk about how you did this, Oswin? The what on the kind of the different um,
This one,
kind of blending
it's
between
just a
different
morph target,
characters.
just morph targets A and B. Um, so I had like a base character with a certain poly count, and then I changed the shapes. I made a copy of the character, changed the shapes into the other character to have like two extremes, and from there I just made it, yeah, a morph target, and morphed it from one to the other, because
Because
that's
this
easier
was really
to have
useful.
something.
This was really useful.
Yeah, it really was,
Mm,
because that helped us to get to where we wanted to be earlier than we could have otherwise.
mm. Yeah, and then I think once we
And
got to this point, the character was pretty much nailed.
yeah, that's true. And one thing that's always like a problem in animation is when you have big feet,
Mm.
because you always have to move those feet below the body and make it possible for the feet to actually pass beneath the body. And I think we went to the extreme where it was still possible, but larger feet, and we might have had a problem.
Yeah. I mean, the feet definitely do clip, but I don't think there would have been a way of making the character walk without it. It's fine. I
Yeah.
think kind of the scales that the characters are at, you do get a little bit of leeway with that
Yeah,
anyway.
abs-
Um,
absolutely. And I really like the Lego kind of feel we ended up with. It really feels like that to a degree, and it's actually what we needed for this.
from the tech art side of things as well, I think we did play around with having different character setups as well, didn't we? But I think we ended up actually just putting a lot of that on the shader. So the different kind of different clothing color variants, different hair variants, and things like that. Um, we ended up kind of like moving over to just setting a random value per character on the shader. And then I think
Yeah,
we actually
because
we split the character in two, didn't we? I get
yeah,
oh
well, we
gosh,
wanted to really keep it simple, and with characters, it can become very complex very easily.
so I think this is kind of like our base character who's very cute on their own. But then we actually used a thing called copy pose, to add some additional little extras on top. So for all of the hair, again, we've got one hair skeleton that's shared across all the different hair meshes. And you can kind of see on this, in fact, let me do one that's got the eyes. There we go. That's a pretty good one. So you can ignore the crate. We just got that as a demo. So you can see that we've got the hair mesh, but we also have the eyebrows, and in some cases we've got some little kind of eyelashes as well, because the characters are kind of they don't have gender because they're triangles, but we've got some little kind of like just extras that we can put on and off the character as we need. So all we need to do to get that to work is to just make sure that we follow the bone hierarchy from the root up to the bone that we need it to kind of like get to. And then from there, kind of like the hats, we can add additional leaf bones off of that to give us extra information. And then for our blueprint setup for the hair, all we need to do then is just to copy pose again from the base character. And then when they walk and they move around, the hair will be attached to them, their eyebrows will be attached, and their eyelashes get attached to the correct bones, and they copy that location. But then if we wanted to, we could also add some additional animation on top of that afterwards as well. I don't think we ended up doing that, but we've got the option of doing that there as well. And you can extend that even more. So if we wanted to give one of the characters a watch or something as well, we could just copy pose up to the arm and then just attach it to the wrist if we needed to.
Incredible.
Yeah, that was very convenient to have it like that. Definitely.
Yeah, that's awesome. And a couple of really clever ways of making the workload more consistent and easier, without having to sacrifice the absolutely adorableness that it is. Every time you pull up a new thing, I'm just I love how you have all of these stockpiled as well. Just like, oh yeah, and I have footage from absolutely everything.
We did most of our discussions over Discord, kind of with the occasional call every now and then. So, it was mostly just, kind of Anya and Oswin were posting stuff up, and then we give feedback, or we just download and shove it straight into the game, which is what happened most of the time. That we put through, and we can do the same with Anya actually as well, because I've got all of the stuff that she posted.
I'm gonna show
as well.
all my awful scribbles.
It's not awful; it's excellent. So we've got a load of the concept that she did as well. So kind of it's again like this is one of the things I loved about kind of her portfolio. Again, it's just there's a real you can basically do everything, right? The same with Oswin. You can go all the way from like those 2D sketches to the final thing, which is so useful. But yeah, we've got all these lovely kind of concept pieces in here. So kind of when we were looking at mocking up bridges, all the different kind of like veggie options as well. I loved it when we were doing the pumpkin. It was just like bigger, bigger, bigger.
More.
Of course, you have to be able to see them.
Like
right?
This was really useful as well. So just having the different variants, and so I think that was your thing, Anya. Is you always gave us 4 of a thing, and it was like which one, and we just kind of like narrow down from
just
there.
pick.
Yeah.
Oh,
spoiled us for choice with the monument, which I love. I love the monument. This is where we get loads of people in the chat saying, "Oh, why didn't you go for 4? That was much better, or 6."
I like the one you went with. I mean, I like all of them.
We're
right.
I love.
Right.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, I don't know if you want to talk about your process with this at all, Anya.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of sums it up, showing all of those iterations. There's obviously a certain amount of back and forth and decision. It was definitely my favorite thing to just having it could build around that. I always love doing like the levels for stuff, like level 1 through 6, and they were great fun. And it also just when you're concepting for yourself, you can always just have a little fun with it because you know exactly how you're gonna. Well, I knew exactly as I was doing this stuff how I was gonna tackle it, and so it's very satisfying to work in that way. But yeah, I really loved working on the monuments.
I love this. I love this concept as well. Just the one where you've got like the finished, kind of sketch, and then just duplicated 6 times, and then drawn over with the different ones, and it's really cool to see how it's almost
Smart, not
identical.
hard, right?
And I think, yeah, exactly, yeah. I love the progression of the build on the monuments. Really nice. Yeah, and then like different rock, kind of formations. We had a lot of discussions over the town hall as well, and kind of what that was going to look like.
Yeah,
I
it
think
was hard
I
to
think
like
that's the one
figure
we
out
spent the most
initially.
time
I think, yeah, we spent a lot of time on that. Like, obviously, the monument, the central thing, the stuff. So, I have a few more left field things, and then some more kind of classic village things. But I
on.
think the classic village feel works quite well for how everything has gone now.
Yeah, yeah. So we kind of started with, I think, these sketches where they were all, again, one of the things I really appreciated was how there was a lot of variation in the initial sketches, just to kind of like really find the direction, and then kind of as we pick, kind of each one. So I think we liked, we liked two of those, the kind of the fortress design and the village design, and we kind of narrowed those down a bit more until we kind of really got a concept that we liked.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Incredible.
taking me back looking through these now because I haven't looked at them in ages. That's good.
Right? It is weird. It was such like a nice project to work on when you can do a little bit of building, a little bit of like the trees, and just like thinking about all of that stuff from scratch. Because you had an initial building, you had like a block out, didn't you? And you sort of said, "Oh, we're not married to this, but this is what we've got right now." And that was great because it gave me a sense of straight away what scale worked there, or if we needed to make stuff smaller scale, larger, like more chunky. So it was really handy to have that like base asset in there, even though it was just a test thing.
Yeah, I need to find. Let me because we've got footage of how the original game looked. Try to look through. So yes, I think this was the art that we had originally, which is just placeholder. So kind of when I first started building the project, I just needed stuff in, right? So I just took some simple shapes and just threw them in, and then we kind of like started building kind of up from there. This is where I was having a chat with Andreas, going through, doing a little bit of testing on the game. And yeah, let's see if there's a bit more. Just the island. That's just the island. None of these are labeled correctly. But yeah, so we had kind of like little blockouts. We had like little tents and some little kind of like farm plots and stuff. But yeah, for the most part, we were, kind of, we went in and we were very much to Anya, like, just like, don't worry about anything that's there. Like, that's absolutely fine. We really wanted her to really run with this, with her own style and her own thoughts on how it would look.
So hard to like
And we ended up,
disconnect from that, like to take something that is like when you have something that someone, it can be like, but you should kind of be like a cube, and you have to like pull yourself out of that and be like, no,
yeah.
just go from scratch. It's fine.
Yeah, but we have these lovely little shrubs now. It's nice little rock pieces. The trees are really nice as well. I'm very happy with those.
They were fun.
Yeah. And there's our monument over there as well.
The beautiful
It's cool
monument.
seeing all of this like working now, because I handed over the assets and I had certain builds of the game that I could look at, but seeing it all actually working and like the little jiggly animations on the trees and stuff, it's like, oh, it's a real game. I love it. Never gets old.
You sound so surprised.
That adds a lot. The wobbliness, that adds a lot. I really like that. It's a nice element.
Definitely.
Yeah, the wobble's really easy as well. It's just a little sine wave on the material.
Oh, that's very clever, actually.
So yeah, I can show you. It's the whole reason we're here.
Yeah.
So we create, when we built it, I created a general master material, which we use because, again, it's nice to have kind of like a base template that we know that we can reuse for all of the different things. And it also means that we can very easily put our own, kind of content in. So I created a function in here called wobble. Very easy to know, and we've got a switch parameter in there that we can enable and disable based on the different variants that we have. So obviously there's a cost associated with this logic. So even though we've got a single material, we don't necessarily want that logic on all of them. Like you can't wobble the town hall, though you may want to eventually, who knows. So we can kind of disable and enable that here. And then all we do is we've got a little wobble gradient that runs through. So this little texture actually kind of acts as a little sine wave, but it's got a little bit of variance to it, just to kind of add a little bit of extra. Then we set a direction. So we actually feed that information into the material, so that when the character hits it, the wobble should hit from the direction that they're hitting rather than just a random axis. And then we just multiply that by the gradient against the character. So, against the object's height. So at the very base of the ground, it doesn't wobble at all because obviously it's attached to the floor and it would look a bit weird if the whole thing wobbled. So we have just a gradient going from 0 up. And we use the object bounds, which is just the kind of the size basically of the asset, to give us a nice kind of even gradient along there. And then that's all we need to do. So we've got our time input there. We input our position along here, and then basically whenever we want the animation to play, we just reset that, and then it plays through that wobble, kind of texture, and it gives us that animation. So every time the villagers go and they hit the tree, you can see you get that nice little kind of hit going through. And it does it on everything.
Amazing.
Even
maybe we can talk about the character animations, since you mentioned the wobble, because to a degree that's linked to the way the characters move, not like with a sine wave, but the whole squash and stretch that I used on them, that also in the end shows on the wobble of the heads. But for me, using squash and stretch, so like squashing the characters, stretching them in their motions, and they do that a whole lot, because they have to read from afar. That was big fun to integrate that, because it's so easy to do that in Unreal. The skeleton we use is super simple. There are no extra bones needed to make it work.
I'm just going to slow this down just so we can see it a bit.
Yeah, there's a lot happening. And I exaggerated it. Each time I tweaked the animations, I exaggerated it more and more and more and more, as far as I could take it, because I really wanted it to read from afar on mobile as well. And for an animator working on animations, applying squash and stretch is like always the nicest thing to do when you work stylized, what I like most actually. and having this squash and stretch adds so much life. It's just really, really cool to get it into Unreal Engine that easily.
Yeah, I love. You don't see a lot of that kind of character, like that really kind of stylized character animation in a lot of the stuff that kind of we've put out in the past, because it's, again, like, it's aiming to be a little bit more realistic. But just that, like, the volume that character's like stomach expands by when they come down, and it's like just balloons out and then comes back up again. You get a really nice kind of sense of movement on that stuff.
Yeah, you can show like some of the work animations, like for the builder, for instance. On all of them, it really shows a lot because I always made like the energy travels through the characters in the animations, and that was actually taking your wobble and taking it a step further for the characters.
Yeah, look at that! Look at that animation there on the hit on the land, and then those legs go so far up, and then it comes back down again. Yeah, really nice.
And he nuts his crate. Ouch, it's gotta hurt.
We've got a preview. We've got to have a preview mesh on there. We got the same with wood chopping as well.
I love it with the box.
Yeah. Makes sense there on that animation. The rest of the animation. But yeah, again, I think this character is going to pop up in a lot of places because it's such a nice little, character to use. Like, I'm going to be using it again, definitely, just on various things.
Oh, it's so cute. I can't get over it. The style of the entire thing is just so incredible. And I have a question for the two of you artists, since we have you here, managed to lure you onto the stream for today. How did you manage to keep things consistent between both of your works, since you were handling the characters' environments separately, but obviously it all came together and feels very cohesive now?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the answer to that is quite simple, and that is that I started first and made some environment stuff, and then Osman joined and made some amazing characters to go in on it. It was quite a linear development process in that sense.
Yeah, that was partly me.
It was easier.
I couldn't think of more than one thing at a time.
Yeah, like the building stuff and environment was pretty much done when I joined. So for me, the biggest challenge was to make it feel right. So I always had like the props from Anya besides the characters to see, does it fit or doesn't it fit? And I was always trying to push it into the direction that they would coexist in a nice way. And
Yeah,
Aaron,
sure.
actually, I think Aaron, what really was super dope, I can't say that often enough, is that you pushed the characters and allowed them to be as wild as they are and as stylized, exaggerated, and abstract in a way as they are. Because that's cool to be allowed to go that far into this direction.
I think it's one of the really nice things.
It was the same with like the environment stuff as well. Sorry, Aaron. I think there's a bit of a delay.
Go.
I was just saying with the environment stuff, it was the same. Like, because the pumpkins were a perfect example where, for something that's top down, the key is getting stuff to read nicely when you're viewing it from this far away. And so initially, the pumpkin patches had, I don't know, 12 or 9 pumpkins, and then we reduced it down, and eventually it's just 4 because you want it to read. And it was the same with the other crops as well, just chunkying everything up and making it as kind of clean as possible, which brings me great joy. I love making stuff as clean as I can.
Yeah, I love the pumpkins. The pumpkins are my favorite crop. I think just generally, I always end up just growing those. But yeah, I
Yeah,
think
they were my
you know
favorite.
the big motivator is just kind of when thinking about things, because when we started building, we knew that we wanted to do low end devices, so we wanted to pick kind of an easily accessible low end device, which is an Android phone, right? Because it's just they're cheap, they're easy to get hold of, the setup requirements are fairly easy for them as well, kind of within reason. So it's really easy, right, to just get an Android phone. And as soon as we started testing, it was really obvious that like everything needed to just be bigger because it's on such a small screen.
Mm.
So I really wanted like everything to be super exaggerated and super blown up, just so that when we put it onto a phone, it still reads and it's still it's still visible and it's clear and obvious what it is, right? So with these pumpkins, you can go in really close to them, you can zoom out really far and you can still see what they are, right? And even though they look kind of silly, at that scale compared to because they're bigger than the villagers are, it doesn't really matter, right? Like it's as soon as you get to really start stylizing content, you can mess with scale quite a lot, and it's absolutely fine.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
the joys of
all of the villagers.
stylized.
And still be realistic, actually, because that's also what works really well, to have the realistic lighting and shading with those extremely exaggerated shapes. That's cool.
Yeah, that's like one of the fun things with Unreal Engine 5 is like working with this stuff, because you make these like really simple meshes, and you spend so much time with them in ZBrush or Blender. You're working on textures, and then you plonk them in Unreal, and they just look great. They look shiny and nice, and it's very, very satisfying. I do love that kind of stylized PBR crossover kind of thing.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, this is just absolutely incredible. I've loved literally everything so far. It's the perfect, the perfect little RTS example. Are there any other systems or anything that you implemented that maybe even through blueprints or something that you think could be uh, a good, almost transferable system for people to have if they want to kind of take this sample and build something further from it?
Yeah, definitely. There's quite a few, especially systems that get quite generic. So this is going to be this is going to show how nerdy I am. But one of my favorite things that I did for this is the prompt, the prompt UI. It's this really small thing, but like it works really well and it's super reusable. I'm going to be using this all the time. So right, like prompts, you need them all the time in games, right? Because you want the user presses a button and you just want to really make sure that they actually want to press that button, right? Because there's some ramifications to pressing it. So one of the examples that we've got is that when you start a new game, it's like, are you sure you want to start a new game? Because it's going to delete the old game.
Right.
So rather than just as soon as you press new game, it just deletes it, right? You want to bring a pop up to be like, you sure you want to do this? And then you can press confirm or you can go back. And it just gives you kind of like the player, kind of just making sure that they're actually wanting to do the thing that they're pressing. And we do the same with quit as well. You sure you want to quit, and you can press confirm or back. So this one ended up being really, really easy to set up, and works really well as kind of just a general UI item. So inside our main menu, we've got kind of the buttons that you can press on there. We actually have a donate button. It doesn't do anything. It's just a demonstration of how in-app purchases work for mobile, so you don't have to worry about that. And that's in purple. But we have so if we want to bring up the prompt, all we need to do is add a push widget, which is basically for common UI, we have a widget stack, which lets you add lots of UI elements one on top of the other, and then you can kind of pull them back and add new ones on as you need. We go into that in a bit more in the video. But we just add the prompt UI, and then all you need to do is set the question. So that bit of text at the start, you just say what you want that text to be, and then you can bind to the confirm button. And then when they press confirm, you can do whichever action that you want. So in this instance, when they press confirm on that, you clear the save that's on the game instance, and then you open the level, which is the village, right? And that's all you need to do. But it's super generic in that all you need to do is push that UI prompt widget, set the text, and then bind to confirm. And that's all you need to do. And you can use that anywhere. So we use it again over here on the prompt for. Oh, sorry, that was the. I've duplicated it there. That's the donate. Sorry. So we basically we have our UI prompt again. We're like, would you like to donate? Blah blah blah, and then you just bind to confirm, or you just bind to confirm, and you don't actually even need to bind to back, because all back does is just remove the element. So you go on to this one, you go on to prompt, so that's the text. So you just set that text. We've got the confirm and back buttons. Each of those just have an event dispatcher for call and back. You press either of them, it calls the relevant button, and then it unbinds anything that is bound to it. So it removes that original binding. And that's what stops you from stacking your bindings to multiple buttons. So we unbind anything from confirm and back, and then we just deactivate the widget. And that's all it is, right? So it's like a really nice kind of like contained little UI element that lets you do it. And I know it's like super lame, but it's like it's a really useful little element. I'm actually was really tempted to just put that in a standalone plugin, along with maybe like a few other UI like little extras, because it was such a nicely contained little element. And where we've got common UI now, it's really easy to just swap out the UI elements for the ones you want. So these buttons are, kind of part of like a generic button set. But because we're using common UI, we can create just a style guide for the button, and then you can put it in. So if you drag and drop this element into your game project, if you've got your style set up already, all you need to do is change the button style, and it would just look like it fits inside your game perfectly, just kind of right from the get-go. So super lame. But yeah.
It is not lame. I actually fully agree that prompts first of all, they're important, especially for people like me who would absolutely click a button without fully thinking about it and annihilating any save data I had before that. So I appreciate it. But I could also see the use case of this in even other aspects of the game, like in crafting, for example, being able to have a prompt that pops up in a crafting menu or things like that. It can be reutilized in so many different aspects with kind of endless opportunities for it. So it's simple, but it's extremely useful and also very efficient. So I appreciate you showing us that.
But yeah, I've tried to put as many things as possible that are like, I've not seen a setup on how to do this particular thing in the engine, right? So like there's quite a lot of them inside the game that I think hopefully people will be like, I wish I knew how to do this one thing, and it's in the game and they can just go to it, they can see how it's done, and they can just copy it. So like one of them is the like nav kind of view. So when you click and drag on a character, you get this nice little kind of path drawn out, but the path to navigate is like a navigation path. So it actually shows you, kind of if they've got stuff in the way, it shows that like how they navigate around that particular path. And that's just using, so this is a Niagara system that's a ribbon. And all we do is we calculate the path that they take, and then we just send an array of points to that Niagara system, and it will just follow that little path. So it's a really nice kind of like little, here's how you go about making a little dotted path or system. So if you were building kind of like a tactics game where you wanted to show the path that the AI would take, you can just use this now to grab that, and it shows you how you would translate that over to a Niagara system. Same with the build menu. When you choose an item, we have this tacked UI element. So there's the UI for place, rotate, and cancel is just a UMG element, but we show you how you go about actually building it, so it would track an item on kind of on the screen and still kind of update correctly, and then also how you'd handle that if you end up going off screen, kind of as well. So as you kind of get to the edge, you can kind of see it's like, oh, I'm just going to track it to the edge there, and push through. And then I think of some more things. We've got so our landscape. It's fully procedural, so it's not using the landscape component, because again, that's not a procedural element. We're actually using geometry script for this one. So we've actually got that inside a plugin so that people can, again, like just extract it if they want to. Basically the geometry script is super simple for it. We just generate a bunch of cones randomly in the world, and then we append a box to the underside, which is going to be kind of like our sea level for that. And then we solidify, which basically voxelizes the entire shape into a single unified mesh. Set our normals, smooth it, so we kind of soften it a little bit, apply some tessellation, and then slice off the top and slice off the underside to just remove the geometry we don't use, and then we're done. And that's kind of it. So if you're interested in kind of like getting into like procedurally building geometry, this is a nice little demo as well, that shows you how you go about building that. And it all we do when we start a new game is we actually just pick a new seed for that island. So you can see we've got a seed input here. As you change that value, you just get a different island for it. At the moment, I've got the tessellation levels quite high, so it doesn't do it immediately. There you go. You can't see it.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. And then we've got other little bits as well. So, kind of the grass in the game. I just need to wait for it to catch up with itself now, because it's decided to change the island again. There we go. So the grass in the game, you'll see that it kind of, it's all over the island. But when we place something down, so like a house, you can kind of see it's overlapping at the moment where we've got it in kind of the placeholder mode. As soon as you place down the item, you can see that it actually removes the grass from that area. And that's actually because each item, or most of the items, will feed into a render target that is aligned to the world. And that render target is used to mask out certain assets. So it actually just masks out the grass in that area. So if you get really close to it, and again, I'm just going to be showing my hand here, but if you get really close, can you see how that there's a little bit of a gap in the grass mesh now? That's actually because it's cut, kind of the edge of the grass mesh out. But it looks so much better than if you just let the grass carry on being intersected with the geometry. So we ended up just kind of keeping it in, and because it's instanced, it's nice and quick on that side as well.
Definitely.
So yeah, there's some extra little tech art tips on that side.
I love that. There's just so much available in this project that are just like individually small little incredible capsules of information that could be very easily expanded upon or repurposed, and it's just an awesome project. So thank you so much for putting it together and giving it out to people for free and letting them experiment with it. It's awesome. So thank you so much for all of your hard work. We have
It's fun to do.
a whole slew of questions that have come in throughout the rest of this. If y'all are up for answering some of those. So yeah, let's go ahead and dive right on in there. I guess one of the first ones is they're wondering if the Cropout sample is going to be updated over time, or if it's this is the sample and have as it is.
Yeah, so absolutely, it's going to be updated. I'm hoping that I can steal Anya for a bit more work at some point to do some more buildings and stuff. Because at the moment there's only a house and the town hall and the monument at the moment. So I'm going, kind of got some plans for it. I'd like to do. We've left some of the game a little bit open ended in places so that you can, so that we can add to it a little bit more. So some stuff I'd like to see is deposits for the different resources. So you can put down kind of like a silo or something to put the food resources that you've got. So not all of the villagers have to go to the town hall just to deposit it. The AI system that I've built is very open for that, so it would be really easy to add. We just need to have some other art assets to do. So it would be nice to have like a little thing like that in there. Also processing as well. Like it'd be really cool to be like, okay, you can chop down wood, but then you need to take it to the sawmill to turn it to planks, and then planks can be used to build other resources and stuff like that. So I think that would be really cool as well.
Whole like weird conversation about like roof tiles, didn't we? We were like, can the house have roof tiles? Because like have they made clay?
Because we were like, where did they get the clay from? If they're gonna be building these houses that have got clay tile roofs. But we decided to just be fine. But yeah, we need like somewhere where they can go and process the clay into proper tiles and stuff like that. So I think that would be really cool, having like that secondary layer in there. I have also left in because we did play around with doing bridges as well. And actually, we built the system, and it seemed like a really cool challenge for people. So we're going to add it back in like later on. But if anyone's interested, I would love to see their take on it, because we ended up coming up with a really interesting solution for doing it. And it would be really cool to see it. I can, if you're interested in doing it, I'll give you a little clue to get you started, which is that kind of when we place down our buildings, we do checks to make sure that they can actually place it down. So if I open up the game a little bit again here, you can see where's my building. There we go. We've got our building here, and you can see the kind of the green outline that lets you know you're good to place it, and you can't place it on other assets because there's a collision check. But then we also needed to account for like, can they place it like kind of on, kind of if they get it right on the edge as well. So there's some script inside the player that is doing that check, and that's a really useful way of knowing like how you would go about building a bridge. And the thing that I really like about the bridge as well is that we naturally get islands form on our, kind of in our game world. So you can see that there's actually a few islands on this one. It's a really nice example, because you don't always get islands. And I really like the bridge blueprint, because it actually lets you solve a problem, kind of like with another design thing that also has extra value in it. So, kind of you could just add some more work to the procedural system to mean that it never spawns an island. But actually, the islands are quite nice, right? So how can you take that unintended consequence and add to the game from that? And the bridge is a really nice way of doing it. So we won't release the bridge straight away. But if you want to have a go, I would love to see, kind of your attempts at it, which would be really interesting. So yeah, we want to have the bridge. We'll obviously be updating it to 5.3 when that comes out of preview. So making sure it's still compatible. We're going to do more platform testing, get it kind of up and running. So we obviously can't release all of the platform specific content because a lot of that stuff's under NDA. But we can release it in some of the private platform channels that we have available. So we'll probably do some of that stuff as well.
That's awesome. Lots of very exciting avenues to kind of expand out the words from it. So very excited to see where that goes in the future. Next question we have here is Cropout currently or going to be backwards compatible with 5.1 or 5.0?
No, No, it's built for 5.2, so 5.2.1 to be specific. So you will need to have that version, unfortunately, in order to do it.
Good to know. Next question from Sergeant Smokey is, was there a reason we didn't include the gas system into Cropout to handle the gameplay side of interactions?
We didn't need gas. Mass, we really heavily considered, but we built this quite, we've been building this quite a long time ago. And mass wasn't quite in the state that it's in now. I think if we'd started building this now, we would have used mass. But at the time, it wasn't quite there yet as a blueprint only demo. But gas, we just didn't feel like we really needed for this particular setup. All of the logic is really simple. So all of the AI is just go to a location, perform an action, which is basically just play an animation until the thing says it's okay to stop, and then transfer a resource or kind of progress that thing up to the next level and then move on. So kind of for things like all of the gathering is in a single AI. So you can go to a tree, you can go to a shrub, you can go to kind of a piece of stone, and you can perform the gather action, which is just going to play an animation with a particular asset and then transfer the resource to the villager, and then the villager goes to the town hall, deposits the resource, and then goes back and just loops it over and over again. So the gas system just wasn't, it's quite a big beast in some ways. So it just made sense to kind of keep it nice and simple.
Yeah, definitely. Anya, there's a question here for you. What was your favorite part of designing and making the assets? Oh, did we lose her?
There we go. There is a delay, so you're going to hear this a while after I've said it. But yeah, working on stuff like this, there is multiple layers to it. I really enjoyed mostly, I think, just being able to work on something like this from scratch, from the early days, where you can start with a blank slate, literally an island in this case, and you can do what you want, like color-wise, material-wise, coming in from that angle and then narrowing it down and coming up with a final cohesive vision. I really enjoyed that aspect, but to be honest, I enjoyed all of it. There's something very satisfying about working on a concept through to block out and figuring out how that's all going to fit together, sculpting it, texturing it, and then coming to a live stream and seeing it work like for real.
Yeah, getting it all actually together and functioning is probably a really special moment from your perspective.
Yeah.
We were also Anya's avoiding the fact that we were like, it's not like a normal game, right? Which we were really heavy explaining when we started this, because we were like, this isn't a normal game because people are going to be able to actually see all of the work that you do in any way that they want. They'll be able to download any of the assets, open them up, examine every single UV, every single model, every single triangle that you've placed, and they can scrutinize all of it. And generally in game development, and generally in game development, you can cut corners, right? It's absolutely fine because no one's ever going to see the UVs of the asset that you're placing down unless there's some weird game requirement for it. But 99.99% of the time, you're going to be able to build the asset, and as long as it looks good and it runs good, and that's kind of all you need to worry about. But with this, because it's an educational resource, we want to make sure that those things we're not necessarily passing on to anyone if they're trying to go, oh, that's how I should build an asset. And it's well, you can kind of get away with that, because again, Annie's an experienced artist, and she knows when she can cut corners and when she can kind of do stuff a little bit easier, because it's because it doesn't matter. But someone who's just starting out with building environment art doesn't necessarily know when that is and isn't okay. So we wanted to make sure that we were demonstrating good practice throughout, and we were really hot on it with all of that stuff.
Oh, honestly, like, I mean, for me as well, you know, it's a great experience because I've worked with UE5 stuff, but I've not worked with the whole nanite side of stuff before, and it is very different to go, like, the normal workflow for me would be to sort of make a block out and then sculpting that, and often you'll end up making the low poly by hand using retopology tools. But in this instance, there's you can keep all that extra geometry. It was often a case of using things like Dynamesh and sort of bringing the poly count down, making sure everything was still really clean. It did feel very wrong to be working with such high poly count levels, especially on something so stylized. I was going back to you, Aaron, wasn't I, for reassurance that I could have all of these edge loops and everything.
You kept on going back and going, are you sure this is okay? Like, we were like, yeah, it's fine, it's okay.
Breaking all the rules.
Yeah. Right,
That's
yeah.
awesome.
It was the same with Oswin. It was the same with Oswin though, right? Like, you know, we were putting like restrictions on Oswin on building the character that you would never bother doing in a production setting, like making sure like that everything was as right as possible, like every bone orientation, every transform, every kind of everything was absolutely spot on. And yeah, so but it's it's just one of the interesting things, right? Like especially with this as a whole, for me as well, like we're building a game, but it doesn't have to be a good game. Like whether Cropout is a good game is completely irrelevant because we're not trying to make a good game. We're trying to build a game well, and like I didn't really kind of process that those are two completely different things until we started building it, and we were like, it's like, is it fun? It's like it doesn't matter if it's fun. Like it matters that it runs well, that it's performant, that it demonstrates good practice in build. Like, but in terms of like tweaking all the kind of all of the food values and making it a challenge, but also kind of like making it easy enough that they can get through and build the monument and all of that stuff, it's like we don't care because like it's not intended to be a game that we release out on any of the platforms. It's intended to be a learning resource for like a for how you go about building these kind of games, and whether it's fun or not is kind of almost irrelevant from that perspective, which is really weird.
Yeah, but still, I had a lot of fun when I played it the first times I played it through, when it was close to finish, and I was like, okay, it's not supposed to be fun, but somehow it is.
Well, it's not that it's not supposed. It's not that it's not supposed to be fun. It's just that we didn't spend any time
have
trying
to be
to make
super
it
polished
fun.
in this regard. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a very different approach to development than I think most people would typically experience.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Next question we have here is from FaithFlex, and they're wondering, where should we go in the project file to start adding new gameplay elements like the PvE element mentioned?
Well, it kind of depends on where you want to go, right? So the general logic for commanding is on the player. So that's in core player and then BP_player. And there's two kind of actions for that. So there's a villager mode and there's a build mode. And all the villager mode does is it goes through, it checks to see if you're selecting a villager or not. If not, you do the drag movement style, which is where you kind of click an empty space and you pull your character, yourself across the screen. But if you do select a villager, we highlight that villager, we add the Niagara ribbon that tracks your position, and then when you release, we we send the villager that particular action. So all that action is basically saying, like, villager, perform something, and use this actor as the base in order to do that. So once the player has sent that action, that's kind of a generic action, right? We can do whatever we want with that. And then from there, the villager will pick up that information. So we go to our villager folder, again inside Blueprint, open up villager, and go to our event graph. You can see that we've got the action command here. And all we do is we check to make sure that that's valid, which it should be. That's just in case. We get the tag from that actor, and we then apply change job. So all you need to do is, if you want to create a new job for that villager to do, is we have a data table of jobs here, which gives them a behavior tree that they need to run, a work animation that they play when they get there, a hat, and a tool. So if you want to add combat to the game, which you can do, flies completely in the face of the intent of the game, which is to be a nice, fun, casual thing. But if you want to add combat, all you need to do is create a behavior tree that is, kind of combat focused. So the enemy that would need to be hunted would need to have a tag that would let the villager know that they need to attack that person. That person. They'd need a behavior tree where the villager would find the nearest enemy and then move to them and then play an attack animation. And then you'd also probably need to make like a sword mesh or, kind of a bow and arrow or something like that. And then you simply make the behavior tree that performs that action. So all the villager will do is they will take that tag that's on the existing actor. They will find the relevant job and the relevant hat and, kind of so on. And then they would set all of that up. So all you need to do is you need to add to the job table with the newly created behavior tree and assets. You don't have to add the assets. They are, you can just leave them blank for now until you've got that set up. And then you just add the behavior tree that you want for that. So it's really open-ended from that perspective. As long as you've got the asset tagged correctly and you've got a behavior tree set and you've got the job added to the table, it will just run it and you're good to go.
That's awesome.
But get them doing something nice, right? Like going over and hugging someone or something.
Yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
Only
I quite like that,
content.
actually, being able to command your villager to go and hug another villager.
Having a bad day. Here's an
That would be
NPC
cool.
hug. Next question here is from Pavel Stepansky. I might be slaughtering that last name. I'm so sorry. But kind of paraphrasing the question down. This is kind of designed in a way to be used across multiple different devices, from very low tech mobile devices all the way up to some higher end PCs. Do you think this could also be repurposed for a VR title as well?
Yeah, absolutely. We haven't set it up for that, but it would be you'd want to do some extra work to it, because you kind of, depending on what kind of VR setup you want, is you might want to have the whole island on the floor, right? Like that could be kind of cool, and then you can kind of just command and move around and look and stuff. So at that point, you'd need to set up a new movement system that you'd need to kind of add on to control kind of move, rotate, and zoom. But for VR, you'd want definitely kind of like a more free-form movement that accounts for the fact that you are in a virtual reality environment. But yeah, absolutely, there's nothing that would restrict you from doing that at all.
Very cool. Next question here from Mighty Studios, and this feels kind of like a good follow-up to the comments you were making earlier about how you might have utilized mass if it had been built a little sooner. But Mighty Studios is wondering, is Cropout's behavior tree method expected to expand to higher RTS populations, or would something more performant like mass be needed?
I think once you get to a certain number, you definitely want to move over to mass, and we'll probably upgrade this to mass. Kind of once it's capable of supporting a fully blueprint only project, which I think it might be by now. It's just that we'd already built it by the time we got to it. So it's definitely kind of on our list of things to upgrade to, along with PCG as well. Kind of PCG would have been great for procedurally spawning the assets, which actually just uses a blueprint. But again, PCG wasn't really ready in time while we were building it. It works on most things, but it didn't work on Android when we tested it, so we had to discard it as an option. But yeah, you definitely, once you're scaling up to certain numbers, you definitely would need to move to mass or something else to cope with that level of density. Once you're getting past a couple of hundred or 100 or so villagers performing actions, it does work reasonably well up to quite a large number. I think I tested it on mid-range Android devices. I think I had about 60 villagers, and it was still running at 30 FPS. So you get quite a lot, and the game's not really designed for managing that many villagers. It's one villager at a time, right? Whereas in other RTSs, you'd select units or you'd select groups of characters. So you definitely want to move to mass for that. But you'd also need to think about some other stuff as well, like instancing. So if you wanted to scale this up to really dense levels, at the moment, all of the actors that are placed in the world. So again, if I go back into the game screen and show, so the island's kind of blank, and then when you bring in, it actually populates it with actors. But all of those assets, my villagers have actually decimated that side of the island, so there's not that many left. But all of these are individual, kind of blueprints and static meshes. Once you get to a certain point, you probably want to have an instance manager that's actually placing those down for you, and then playing the animation using per instance custom data, and removing them as necessary. And that would be probably a better way of having that set up, rather than just placing down individual actors, kind of one after the other, because you are kind of relying on the auto instancer and stuff like that to kind of handle that for you. But yeah, definitely, once you reach certain levels, you probably would want to move over to mass.
Okay. Makes sense to me. Let's see. I know you did go over this a little bit kind of near the beginning of the stream, but for anyone who might have missed that part, do you have recommendations of where to set max LOD levels per platform?
Yeah. It's just on the mesh. So inside all of the meshes, I'll do crop corn 2 as an example. So you have a minimum LOD button here, and you've also got kind of streamed LODs as well that you can set. But basically, each of these, if you open it up, you'll see that you have all of the platforms. And if you've got other platforms added to the engine, like kind of PlayStation or Xbox, then they'll be there as well. And you can basically specify what you want each LOD to be. So you can see when I add mobile in, you can see that we get a mobile minimum LOD on there as well. So all you need to do is kind of set that to whichever one you want it to be, and then you're good to go for that asset. And then the only other extra thing you probably want to do is, once you've done it for one, you'd want to do it for all of them. So you go to your level of detail, you copy LOD, select those, go back over and just paste LOD over. And then what that will do is it will just copy all the settings that you set up on that one across to all of the other ones. And then your LODs are good to go. Textures, slightly different. You need to go to your tools and go to your device profiles. I found that you generally don't want to actually change any settings in this area, because it's not linked to the game-specific version of the device profiles is actually, I think, linked to the engine default device profiles. But in here, you've got all of your profile settings for each of the platforms that you have. I tend to ignore the kind of like the actual, like all of the Android specific ones. I generally just look at Android high, mid, low, and then Android as the master. Same with, kind of iOS devices and PlayStation and stuff like that. You go to your settings, and then under here, you've got texture LOD settings. And here you specify the max LOD size of the texture you want. And then you can also specify, kind of LOD biasing as well. So that way you can limit the texture size. So for Cropout, Anya did all of the textures, I think, at 4K. Just so that we had as much texture memory as we could possibly need. We had no intention of using them at 4K, but kind of in 5 years when Cropout 2 needs to come out and we want the higher res textures, we'll have those already, kind of ready and good to go. So inside our textures folder, we've got all of our, kind of all of our textures. They're at 4K. We actually lock them down to 2K at maximum, which probably is too much for this anyway. It's probably more than we need. But the game's small enough, we don't really need to worry about it. And then we actually downscale them down to from 4K to 2K. And then for Android devices, we downscale them again. So they actually maximum start at 1K and 512 based on the different type of texture that it is.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh. I have so many ideas for myself. Just going through all this. It's incredible. Let's see. Next question is from Cecina, and they're wondering if you can talk about the clouds because they saw the shadows of nice, big, beautiful, fluffy clouds going across the ground. They're wondering if you can elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, sure. So as you can see, we've got our nice little clouds cast on the ground. If you look up, there's no clouds. We're actually just using a light function on the directional light that just gives a simulation of it. So again, it's a really nice thing. It's been in the engine for ages. But basically, on any light, again, I think you have to make sure it's either movable or stationary for it to work. We have a thing called light function. And all you need to do on the material is just specify the material domain to light function, and then the emissive color acts as a mask for that light. So all we do here is we have a little texture, which is this one here, which is our clouds texture. For this one, I run it twice. At slightly different scales and at slightly different angles, so that gives you a nice kind of, it doesn't just look like a single panning texture then, it actually looks like the clouds are kind of moving and shifting a little bit as they move through. So I just scale that in, kind of in texture coordinate space, pan it, and then mix them together, and then have my strength, and then that gives me this final result here. You can actually change, I've got these values exposed, so you can change them. I go in here, so you can kind of see that we can kind of modify the cloud mask on that a little bit. Same with this, we can sharpen it. You can have them like really. We found a nice middle ground with them, so you gotta play around with it a little bit. Yeah.
Lovely.
So yeah, that's all it is. You just throw that into the light function material. You can scale it and you can set a fade distance as well on there. And then you're good to go.
Very cool.
Adds a lot, honestly. Like whenever I've been doing open world projects, one of the biggest things that adds a lot of kind of realism and grounding to a world is just putting that light function in with some clouds in. Yeah, it makes the scene really feel like it's got it's properly grounded. So I always recommend adding that.
That's very good advice. It's also just such a lie, but it's fine. No.
It is, yeah. It is, yeah, but it's either that or having like a proper volumetric cloud system and marking it as casting shadows, which you can do and is just a tick box in the engine, but you never look up in this game, so it seemed like a waste to put some really expensive volumetric clouds just above the player.
Yeah, that would That would be a little painful, I think, to set up and never be able to actually look at them. All right. Well, I've got one question left for you, Erin, and then I have a final question that I would like to pose to all of you and get all of your thoughts on it. And then I think that might be a good place for us to wrap up for today. But this last question for you, Erin, is from McQueen. And they're wondering, since this isn't an actual game, as you said, do you ever feel the urge to create an actual game since you're putting in so much effort into these samples? Or do you view this more as it being educational and less of as an outlet of you as an individual developer?
I feel like it's close enough that it's fine. And when I'm making a game, the thing that I love the most is the little like the problem solving side of things anyway. And you're doing just as much of that in these as you are if we were making a game like a full game. The only thing that I don't have to worry about is the annoying side of making a game. Like I don't have to go and contact any of the like any streamers or any people and beg them to play my game. I don't have to do any marketing. I don't have to worry about sales. I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. I just get to make the bits of the game that I like and put all the cool tech stuff into it and hang out with cool freelancers and work with them. And then we get to release the game and people benefit from it. And that's that's good. That's good for me. I love all of that stuff. So yeah, it hits just as well.
I think it's like a good project for everyone, right? Like it's like small enough that the stakes are relatively low. As you say, you're not having to like full on market a game, but you still get to do the fun stuff and make something that is. I think there's double side to the satisfaction. You're making something that is teaching people stuff, which is nice.
Yeah, definitely. I think having that kind of special connection of being able to teach people how to do something is also, very rewarding in and of itself. So this is awesome. Great work that you have all done. I'm very proud of you. Claps all around for all three. And then the final question that I had that I have, I think I'll just kind of go around to each of you one at a time to get to your answer here. But through this whole process of making the sample project, do you have one piece of advice that you've maybe garnered through the process that you would like to offer other developers through what you've learned and done?
I don't want to go first, but I'm trying to think of something.
I think the single thing that always hits for everyone, no matter what your experience level is to always remind yourself to keep it simple as far as possible, because it's so easy. The more things you know, the more ideas you will have of how you could solve something. But in the end, it always, or not always, but often enough, it comes down to, oh, okay, there's a simpler way to do it. Let's just do this instead of overcomplicating things and making it worse because it becomes more and more blown up. It's better to nail it down to simpler things that you do really well instead of a lot of stuff that end up being mediocre because you don't have enough time to really foster it and make it good.
I think that's great advice. I know I threw a very hard question out at you all.
I'll
right
just
at
give
the end there.
an answer, which I think I'm saying this as I'm an artist, which I would say you have a lot of polygons to play when it comes to Unreal Engine 5 and the Nanite system. And it can be a bit overwhelming. You don't necessarily need to use them all. So it is still, I think, use the older school art workflows for this stuff. Like, don't be too overwhelmed by what you see, like when you open up a wireframe of these meshes and it's just polygons. You don't need to do that. That's just like top level, like what you can do with stuff.
Definitely.
Yeah,
I
because
think
it adds up. Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me it's hard to say because it sort of flies in the face of everything that I've thought of in the last, my career in game dev. But I think it's more important that it's fun than it runs well. Like it's the opposite of this game, right? Like if you're building a game, like like if you've got it fun, you've done the hard bit. Like getting it to run well is, it's still hard. It's still difficult to do, right? But like that first challenge is more important. I think, kind of it was the interesting thing making something without that intention to make you realize that the two things are very different in a lot of ways, right? Like you need it to run well eventually, but when you're starting, it is more important that you're building something that is fun, um, or engaging, right? Like it doesn't need to be fun, but like depending on the game you're building. But yeah, meet that goal first,
Yeah.
or do both.
Awesome. All of this was fantastic advice. And I want to say one last big thank you to all three of you for coming on and talking about this today and walking through different parts of the project. And of course, just making the project in the first place. So thank you all so much for doing that. And then especially to you, Oswin and Anya, for coming onto the show, even though both of you are traveling right now. I do very much appreciate you taking the time and effort to come on the show and chat with us and go through all of this with us. So big thank you to you three guests, everyone in chat. Um, let's give a big thanks to everyone who came on and gave the time today for it. For any of you who are watching, if you're interested in the project, it is available now for free. You can go download it on the marketplace. We'll link where you can go do that right now. There's a bunch of other information around this project as well. I know Aaron put a lot of time and effort into some extra information that'll be coming out about the project as well. So make sure you go check that out. If you have further questions or anything like that, yeah, play around with it, have fun, do new things. Tag us on socials if you do anything and want to show us. It's always fun to see what people come up with and what they make, so keep us involved. We love seeing what you do. And also one last big thank you to everyone who watched, because the show wouldn't be what it is without you and your participation and your interaction and your questions. So thank you so much for being here as well. Yeah, that's everything that I can think of. I think I finished the outro. I've done it enough times I feel like I should know, but I don't remember. Follow us on socials.
We've got to say as well, if you're not interested in Cropout, but you are interested in Oswin and Anya for work, their contact details are underneath their names. They were a delight to work with. So yeah, so definitely, if you're needing environment artists or character artists and animators, then reach out to them.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Of course. I mean, your work was amazing. So come on now. You see him. You see the great work. Do what you got to do. But yeah, you can keep up with us on all social media, Unreal Engine. If you missed any other part of this stream, don't worry. We post all of our streams in video format that can be viewed on demand on both our Twitch and YouTube channels. And other than that, yeah, we'll see y'all next week for next episode of Inside Unreal and also LFG on next Friday. Thank you one last time to our guests, and we'll see y'all later. Bye, everyone.
Thanks for having us.